She left to get my cake on my birthday. She returned with empty hands and someone else's cologne. Some people lie so often they forget the silence in between is where the truth hides. She looked left. Every time. As if the truth lived to her right and she couldn't face it. There's a kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, it presses on your chest. That was the silence I stood in when she walked through the door, empty-handed on my birthday. No box. No candle. No cake. Only a scent I didn't wear and a smile that didn't belong to me. She looked polished, but wrong. Hair too carefully brushed, lips too freshly colored, breath just a second too fast. And her hands, I noticed them first. Trembling like they'd done something they weren't supposed to. She didn't offer an apology, just mumbled something about the bakery line, how everything was sold out. The lie passed through her lips easily like it had been practiced on the way home. I didn't question her. I nodded, kissed her cheek, told her it was okay. It wasn't. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed while she brushed her teeth, watching the flickering hallway light cast shadows on the wall like ghosts waiting to speak. Something had shifted and I felt it everywhere. In the way she avoided my eyes. In the way her phone was face down on the nightstand. In the way she didn't say happy birthday again even as she slid under the covers and turned away. I didn't sleep. I just listened. To her breathing. To the buzz of a message she didn't check. To the silence that followed. The next morning she was cheerful. Bright, even. Like the night before hadn't happened. She kissed my cheek and asked what I wanted for breakfast. I told her I wasn't hungry. She didn't press. Just hummed and moved around the kitchen like she was in a movie where the husband doesn't notice, doesn't suspect, doesn't ask. But I did. I noticed how the laundry smelled different last week, like citrus and sandalwood. Not my scent, not hers. I noticed how she stopped wearing the bracelet I got her, said it didn't go with anything anymore. I noticed how she flinched, just slightly, when I touched her back in the grocery store aisle. Sometimes betrayal doesn't enter like a storm. Sometimes it slips in through the cracks like cold air, unnoticed until your bones are already aching. The perfume could have been from a store clerk. The tremble could have been from the cold. The missing cake could have been a mistake. But the story didn't add up. And the worst part? I didn't want it to be true. So I waited. I watched. I let her kiss me goodbye like nothing had changed. I watched her walk to the car with that same tight smile, her phone already in her hand, fingers typing too fast to be casual. I told myself I needed proof. That I was being rational. That I wasn't the jealous type. But the truth is I already knew. You don't need a confession when the silence screams loud enough. The bakery's security cameras showed every customer that afternoon except her. I hadn't meant to call. Not at first. I told myself it wasn't worth it. One missed cake didn't prove anything. But the scent was still in our sheets the next morning, soft and foreign and unmistakably not mine. So I called the bakery. I even smiled through the phone as if they could hear my expression. Just a polite inquiry. My wife stopped by yesterday, around 3:30? She said the line was long and they'd sold out of everything. Just wondering what cakes you'll have next weekend. The woman on the line was cheerful. Oh, we weren't too busy yesterday. In fact, we had a whole fridge of cakes no one touched. Chocolate raspberry, tiramisu, vanilla almond. My breath caught. So, no one cleaned you out? A pause. No, sir. We closed with extras, actually. I waited, the silence suddenly thick. Then asked the real question like I wasn't really asking, just out of curiosity. You have cameras, right? Out front. Yeah. Standard policy. Of course you do, I thought. Of course you do. That night, while she slept with her back to me again, I sat in the living room, laptop open. I knew which streets had city cams. I'd passed them enough times, always seeing them as background noise. Now they were eyes I couldn't unsee. One pointed right at the lot outside that bakery. I clicked through the footage. Watched a blue minivan pull in. A silver Civic. A woman in a green parka with 2 kids. I watched the hours slip by, cars coming and going, headlights flickering like little eyes. Her car, the black CRV with the dent in the bumper, never appeared. Not once. She hadn't gone to the bakery. She hadn't even driven by it. The next morning I asked without asking. How bad was the line at the bakery again? I poured her coffee slowly, watching the steam curl up between us. She blinked. Just once, then again. Did I say bakery? She said too casually. No, I meant the supermarket. I was going to get the cake there. But they were out too. That blink. That pause. Like a buffering lie trying to load. Strange, I thought. You didn't bring groceries either. I didn't say it. Just nodded and let her words hang between us like mist that never lifts. She scrolled her phone like she was checking the weather, but I could see her thumb tremble. Just a little. That day, I opened the Notes app on my phone and started a list. I didn't know what I was building, a timeline, maybe, or a case. All I knew was that something was unraveling and I needed to hold the thread before it vanished. April 14th, her story changes, bakery supermarket. No groceries, no cake. April 13th, said she'd go to bakery. Footage, she never arrived. I gave it a title without thinking, The Days She Went Missing, while standing right in front of me. It wasn't about the cake. Not really. It was about what she'd replaced it with. She hadn't forgotten my birthday. She just decided someone else mattered more. And she was counting on me to not look too closely. Lies don't always shout. Sometimes they whisper until the truth sounds impolite. The cake wasn't missing. The intention was. Her lies started stepping on each other. There's a strange kind of calm that settles in once you know someone is lying. Not just once, but repeatedly, in loops, in fragments, in misremembered details that never line up the same way twice. It's the calm of clarity even when your chest still tightens every time they speak. Her lies were getting lazy. First, it was the bakery, the cake that vanished into thin air, the long line that didn't exist. Then, 2 days later, she said she'd stopped at her sister's place that afternoon, just for a minute, to drop off some magazines. I didn't ask why that mattered. I didn't remind her that her sister lives an hour in the opposite direction. The next week, she mentioned she'd gone for a walk instead. You know, just to clear my head, she said, stirring her tea like she was trying to make the water forget too. I just nodded. Each version came softer, like she was hoping I'd forget the original. But I didn't. I remembered everything, the way her hair had smelled like musky cologne, the way she'd set her keys down too carefully that night as if hiding evidence in plain sight. She started looking left when she spoke. Every time. It was so consistent, so reflexive, I started to wonder if the truth lived in her right peripheral and she couldn't bear to face it. I'd ask a simple question, did you say hi to your sister for me? And her eyes would flick left, just a second too long. Not down. Not nervous. Left. As if rehearsing. It became a game I didn't want to play, but couldn't stop watching. Her stories arrived out of order now. On Tuesday, she claimed she'd been home all afternoon reading. By Thursday, she said she'd gotten caught in traffic coming back from downtown. No mention of the book. No memory of reading. And still, I said nothing. Because that's what silence is, isn't it? A mirror. I wanted to see what she'd become when no one pressed her. I wanted to see if the weight of her stories would eventually collapse under their own contradictions. Sometimes I caught her rehearsing in her head, lips moving faintly before she answered, like she had to scroll through the script. I started logging it. April 15th, said she went for a walk. Day before, said she went to bakery. Day before that, her sister's. Left, I flick every time she lies. Heartbeat visible in her throat when I ask innocent questions. The truth was hiding, but not well. And still, part of me hoped I was wrong. That she was just scattered. Tired. Forgetful. But the body doesn't forget. The mouth might lie, the memory might bend, but the eyes give it all away. And hers were saying things her lips never dared. I started recording our conversations. Quietly. Just audio. Just enough to hear the edits in her tone, the little changes in sequence. I wasn't trying to catch her. Not yet. I was trying to make sense of the moment when the woman I loved became a stranger in my own home and didn't seem to notice. Or care. There are moments that split your world into before and after. I opened that email and everything changed. The worst part wasn't seeing her laugh in someone else's arms. It was realizing she never tried to save that laugh for me. She didn't forget the cake. She just gave it to someone who wasn't me. I knew what I'd see before I clicked it. Maybe not the details, not the exact shape of the room, not the expression on her face, but the feeling. That part had already been with me for days. Weeks. Maybe longer. The investigator didn't include a message. Just a subject line, as requested. Inside were 3 photos. No words. No speculation. Just truth laid out like evidence on a cold metal table. In the first image, she was sitting sideways on someone's lap. A man I didn't recognize. Dark hair, pressed shirt, hand on her thigh like it belonged there. She was wearing the green blouse I'd always loved. The one she said made her feel too dressed up for errands. In the second, she was laughing. Not smiling. Laughing. Head tilted back, carefree. The kind of laugh that doesn't fake easily. The kind of laugh I hadn't seen in her home for years. In the third photo, the two of them leaned over a small cake. Chocolate frosting. Pale script along the edge. Forever yours. That was my birthday cake. I didn't react. Not at first. Just stared at the screen while the hum of the refrigerator filled the silence behind me. My hand hovered over the trackpad, but I couldn't bring myself to click away. The moment had split me clean down the middle. There was before that image and now there was after. I thought I feel rage. Thought maybe I'd punch the table or throw my coffee against the wall. But all I felt was stillness. Like standing in a room after the air has been sucked out waiting to remember how to breathe. She hadn't just lied. She'd celebrated. There was a candle between them in the photo. Half melted. Like they'd already made a wish. And for the first time I understood that this wasn't about loneliness or mistakes or emotional confusion. This was something else. A decision. She hadn't forgotten my birthday. She'd just chosen to spend it in someone else's lap, laughing over a cake that said forever yours while I sat in our kitchen wondering if the bakery had run out. I closed the laptop. I'd already made a reservation, not for revenge, not even for confrontation. Just quiet, necessary distance. A hotel downtown. Clean. Unassuming. Enough space to think. To plan. To stop pretending that love was still the thing between us. She came home that night humming. Said traffic was insane and asked if I wanted Thai or pizza. I said nothing. Just smiled. Let her believe her lie still floated. Because what she didn't know was that the fall had already happened. Not hers. Mine. And I wasn't going to crash again. I didn't plan revenge. I planned symmetry. I didn't want to hurt her. Not in the way people usually mean when they say that. I wasn't interested in shouting matches or shattered dishes or some vindictive performance designed to humiliate. What I wanted was silence. Reflection. A mirror. I wanted her to see what she looked like from the outside. The plan didn't come in a burst of rage. It came in the kind of stillness that lives in old libraries and funeral homes, quiet, deliberate, clean. I wasn't after revenge. I was after symmetry. Balance. The man in the photograph, the one whose hand rested too comfortably on my wife's thigh, had been wearing a branded hoodie. A brewery logo across the chest and beneath it a name stitched neatly into the cuff. Elena. It didn't take much. A reverse image search of the hoodie logo led me to a local engagement shoot on the brewery's Instagram. Him and Elena. Smiling in the sun. Can't wait to be Mrs. Clark, she'd written in the comments. Her profile was public. Still, that surprised me. So much of their lives were there, unguarded. Like they never imagined someone would come looking. I drafted the message like a letter, not a warning. Calm. Respectful. Hi, Elena. I don't want to cause chaos. I just thought you deserved to know. I believe your fiancé and my wife are having an affair. I have photos. If you'd like to see them, let me know. I'm sorry. I know how this feels. She replied 6 hours later. Yes. Please. I sent the photos. And then I made a reservation. A table for 4. Candlelight. A quiet booth at the same place she and I had celebrated our 5th anniversary. She liked the place because they poured the wine with ceremony like every glass meant something. I picked it for the same reason. I confirmed the time. 7 p.m. Saturday. Then I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I wore the cologne she used to buy me for Christmas. The one she said made me smell like the man I fell in love with. It had sat untouched in the back of the drawer, the glass bottle still mostly full. I spritzed it on and watched the mist curl in the mirror. It smelled like memory. At 6:45 I arrived and asked for the booth by the window. The host smiled and led me there. I sat down alone. Elena arrived at 6:59. She looked exactly like someone on the edge of breaking and rebuilding all at once. Dignified. Nervous. Quietly furious. We didn't hug. Just nodded. At 7:06 they arrived together. Laughing. She had her hand on his arm. He didn't see us at first. But she did. Her face froze. Then reset. Then faltered again. It was the pause that said everything. I didn't say a word. Just gestured to the booth. Her eyes widened. His mouth opened slightly. Elena reached into her purse and pulled out the photos I'd printed for her. Laid them on the table. Like business cards. Like proof of a sale no one could walk back. I smiled. Not cruelly. Just enough to acknowledge the symmetry. Because there's a difference between revenge and poetry. She had brought Forever Yours to someone else's table. I just made sure she understood what it tasted like from the other side. Some things don't need to be shouted. They just need to be shown. I didn't want to ruin her night. I wanted to mirror it. When she walked in and saw all of us there, the air left her face. She wore red. Of course she did. The dress hugged her ribs like it had something to prove. Her heels clicked across the restaurant floor in that practiced way of hers, not fast, not hesitant. Just enough sway to say, I know exactly what I'm doing. But she didn't. Not this time. Her eyes scanned the room in that autopilot way people do when they expect to be adored. She was mid-laugh, mid-sentence, one hand brushing the cuff of his jacket when she saw us. And the air left her face. It wasn't just the surprise. It was the instant inventory happening behind her eyes. Who knew what? How much? When? Why here? Why now? She froze like a scratched record. Still beautiful. Still composed until she wasn't. Because then she saw Elena. Not just Elena's eyes, sharp and deliberate, but Elena's hand, resting protectively over the slight swell of her stomach. I hadn't known she was pregnant. That wasn't part of the plan. But fate has a taste for symmetry too, I suppose. The man, her man, stood beside her like a mannequin. His expression unreadable, but the tension in his shoulders told the whole story. The weight of being caught in someone else's ending. And me? I was already seated. Calm. Holding a glass of red wine. The same wine we toasted with on our 5th anniversary. A waiter approached to refill my glass. I thanked him softly. I didn't look at her yet. I waited. She took a step toward us. Then stopped. Her knees buckled slightly. Just enough for me to notice, not enough for anyone else to comment. I gestured to the open seat beside Elena. A seat for 4. She blinked rapidly, lips parting like she might explain it all. But no words came. Just the sound of distant silverware and quiet jazz unraveling behind her. She tried to sit. Her hands gripped the back of the chair, knuckles whitening, and she forced herself down, spine rigid, breath shallow. Hi, she whispered. Not to anyone in particular. Just to the air, maybe. To the version of herself that was slipping through her fingers. Elena looked at her, not with anger, but with a terrible, quiet pity. Then pulled the printed photo from her purse again and slid it across the table. Face up. The two of them. My wife on her fiancé's lap. The cake between them like a joke no one was laughing at anymore. I didn't know, Elena said, voice even. Until I did. That was all. No shouting. No drama. Just truth on the table like a spilled glass of water no one bothered to mop up. The man, the one who'd touched my wife like she belonged to him, stood behind Elena, silent. Maybe waiting to speak. Maybe knowing there was nothing left worth saying. And my wife? She stared at the photo like it might rearrange itself into a better version. One where the frosting said something else. One where she'd never been caught. But the picture didn't change. It never does. I took a sip of wine. Watched her watching herself. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't a trap. This was the moment the mirror finally turned. You can't rehearse sincerity. And you can't fake not being found out. Some dinners don't need food. Just a reckoning. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I raised my glass. The knife was in the quiet. No shouting. No pointing fingers. Just a single raised glass and the sound of her breathing too quick, too shallow. To the truth, I said softly. It always shows up uninvited. No one moved. My voice didn't shake. My hand didn't tremble. If anything, I'd never felt steadier. The wine swirled gently in the glass, casting shadows across the white tablecloth. She flinched like the words had teeth. Maybe they did. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Across from her, Elena's fingers twitched slightly against her water glass. I could see her jaw tighten as she worked to stay composed, but her voice, when it came, was clear. Almost gentle. How long? Just 2 words. Not shouted. Not even especially bitter. But they landed with weight. The kind of weight that changes things. My wife, my stranger, didn't answer. Neither did he. He stared down at the napkin in his lap like it held all the answers he'd never be brave enough to give. His mouth twitched once, then stilled. Elena nodded, once. As if that told her everything. The silence stretched thin, and then the waiter arrived. Timing is cruel sometimes. He smiled politely, placing a small white plate at the center of the table. Compliments of the gentleman, he said with a nod toward me. The cake was tiny. Deliberate. One perfect swirl of frosting on top, with 2 words piped in delicate script. Forever yours. She stared at it like it burned. Her pupils shrank. Her lips parted just slightly. And for a second, I wondered if she might cry. But she didn't. She just folded her hands in her lap and stared at the words like she could unwrite them. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Not me. Not Elena. Not him. Especially not her. No one touched the cake. I watched them like I was watching a play I'd already read the ending to. Every gesture scripted. Every flinch familiar. My wife glanced at him once, just briefly, like she was checking for backup. But he wouldn't meet her eyes. That was new. She traded laughter and intimacy for silence and distance. In real time, in public, with candles flickering between us. Poetic, almost. I raised my glass again. To revelations, I said. to not needing to explain anymore. Still no one spoke. There was no climax, no confession. Just the quiet collapse of what they'd tried to hold together with secrecy and stories. And I let it happen, because the truth didn't need an audience. It just needed a moment, and I'd given it one. Some toasts aren't for celebration. They're for release. The truth doesn't knock. It walks in, sits down, and orders dessert. You can feel a person fall apart without them saying a word. She opened her mouth, but the words didn't come. Just a whisper, thin and brittle. I can explain, maybe, or something close to it. I'm not sure. It was the kind of voice you only hear when it's already halfway gone. The kind that isn't asking for forgiveness, just trying to stay upright. No one answered her, because nothing needed saying anymore. The shatter wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was in the way her shoulders sank by centimeters, like someone had cut invisible strings. In the way her fingers fumbled against the edge of the napkin, folding and unfolding the corner like a child lost in a thought they couldn't fix. The man she chose, the one who had once smiled beside a cake that should have been mine, wouldn't even look at her. He stared past her, at some empty place behind her head. His posture was hollow now, like he realized too late that the fantasy he'd been living came with a receipt. And Elena? She didn't speak either. She just exhaled, slowly. Her lips pressed together in that particular way that says I am holding it together because I have to, not because I want to. Then she pushed back from the table, her chair scraping quietly against the tile. Her eyes were glassy, blinking fast, but no tears fell. She hadn't been blindsided. She'd just been finished. And I simply stood. I folded my napkin carefully, placing it beside the untouched cake. Forever yours. I wondered, for a split second, if the staff would notice the irony when they cleared the table. If someone would scrape those words into the trash and feel a shiver without knowing why. My wife, no, the woman who once wore my trust like a second skin, looked up at me like she wanted something. A reaction. An answer. A pause. I gave her none. Just the back of my chair sliding in. My jacket buttoning at the wrist. My footsteps leaving. I didn't slam the door. Didn't shout. Didn't toss a drink across the table like some movie scene. I left them with the bill, a literal one, and the kind that doesn't print numbers. The kind that costs you something deeper. Something internal. Closure, I've learned, doesn't always need noise. Sometimes it just needs a plate of uneaten dessert. A pair of lovers too ashamed to speak, and the one man walking away without needing anything more. Not answers. Not apologies. Not even the last word. She didn't cry. Not then. But her silence cracked like glass. I didn't need her to explain. I needed her to feel the weight of not being heard. She texted me later. You didn't have to do it like that. I never replied. The text came hours later, long after the plates had been cleared and the silence had settled. You didn't have to do it like that. No punctuation. No apology. Just that one sentence, brittle and sharp, like a bone that had broken before and never set right. I stared at the screen for a while, not out of uncertainty, but because I wanted to feel something. I didn't. Not anger, not triumph, not even sadness. Just space. And in that space, I opened an old folder I hadn't touched in months. The videos weren't hidden. I just stopped watching them. Clips from our weekend trips, our Sunday mornings. Her smile in the sunlight. The way she used to reach for my hand absent-mindedly when we crossed the street. It wasn't painful at first, just familiar. Then I found a video I hadn't labeled. In the kitchen, some winter morning. She was making coffee, humming something off-key. I cracked a joke. Something dumb, something small. And the camera, perched on the counter, caught everything. She laughed, sort of, but not really. It was the eyes, not her mouth. Her smile still worked back then. But her eyes, they weren't with me. They were already somewhere else. That was before the cake. Before the perfume. Before I noticed how her stories started contradicting themselves by the hour. Back then, I blamed myself. I thought I'd grown distant. I thought maybe I'd stopped listening or touching or choosing her in the little ways that matter. But rewatching it now, I saw it differently. She was already leaving. Quietly. Incrementally. And she had chosen not to tell me. That's the part no one talks about, how betrayal starts with silence. How it isn't just the physical moment but the 100 quiet ones before it. The withholding. The half-truths that pile up in the space between dinners and kisses. I watched another clip, this time from our anniversary last year. She posed with me, smiling for the waiter's camera, our hands intertwined over a shared plate. But in the free frame I saw it again. That same look. Her body was beside mine, but she had already detached. Like someone halfway through packing a suitcase in their mind. So no, I didn't do anything like that. She did. I just let the mirror speak. And sometimes, the echo of that reflection is louder than any reply. I didn't text her back. I didn't need to. Some people don't break your heart. They walk away holding it slowly while pretending they're still deciding. She said I didn't have to do it that way. But she had already done it, just more quietly. She chose him. I chose the truth. I'm not angry. Not anymore. Anger is loud, and I don't live in that volume now. What remains is quieter, something closer to understanding. Not forgiveness, not sympathy. Just a stillness that comes when you finally stop trying to make sense of someone else's choices. She chose him. That was clear. Not in some grand romantic gesture, but in the little ways. The drift. The deflections. The softness that once belonged to me slowly poured elsewhere until I was left holding a shell of what we used to be. And me? I chose the truth. Not vengeance. Not resentment. Just the clarity that comes when you stop explaining things to people who already made up their minds. Some endings don't roar, they exhale. Quiet and complete. I moved out of the house. Left the memories in drawers and closets. The ring went into a shoebox in the garage next to old photos and receipts that no longer mattered. I didn't need to burn anything. Letting it sit there, untouched, felt more final. And I walk lighter now. I still pass by that bakery sometimes. The same one she pretended had nothing left to give me. The windows are always full, cakes lined up in glass cases like soft-spoken promises. Chocolate ganache, red velvet, vanilla almond. Always enough? That's what haunts me, I think. There was always enough. She just didn't bring it home. It was never about the line. It was about loyalty. And when you strip away the stories, the mistakes, the timing, that's what betrayal is. A quiet, repeated decision to give your honesty to someone else while expecting to keep mine. She reached out again last week. Just a message. Said she missed the way I used to hold space for her even when she didn't deserve it. I didn't reply. Not because I hate her, but because I finally love myself enough not to bleed for someone who only learned to reach when things were already broken. The truth cost me something, but it gave me more. Now, I only keep what doesn't lie when it's convenient. Only love what doesn't need hiding. Only believe what doesn't shift under pressure. She lives in a version of her life where the cake was sold out. I live in one where I know it never was. And that, I've learned, is the difference between a wound and the exit. Closure isn't the door slamming shut. It's realizing you were already outside. I didn't need to make her hurt. I just needed to stop pretending she didn't.